Help give kids an extra life by donating today to help sick and injured children. Link in the description and pinned comment below.
You know, with vampires, skeletons, and zombies, the scariest thing I've seen is politicians.
Eventually I'll run out of spoopy-themed games to talk about for Halloween. When that happens, I'll just switch my pattern. But for now, let's talk about Capcom again. Just like Sega's been rebounding from a 70% drop in profits in 2018 by focusing on more than just Sonic, Capcom's been working hard over the past few years after a dark age of their own, with Mega Man coming back into relevance with a new game and a bunch of collections, Monster Hunter more popular than ever, Devil May Cry returning to its main timeline, Resident Evil... okay, that one's a little mixed, but you get the picture. Heck, even Street Fighter V, after its disaster of a launch, has become more like the kind of game it should have been to begin with. Which leads to the elephant in the room. And by in the room, I mean buried under the floorboards like the Telltale Heart. But we fighting game fans hear it. Dear Lord, do we hear it. See, there was a time when Capcom's fighting game division didn't rely solely on Street Fighter and Marvel. That was back in the 90s and early 2000s. But among the various experiments that Capcom made, the one that fans remember the most was a little series called Darkstalkers. AKA what will probably happen in the minds of the Street Fighter team after binging monster movies from Blockbuster. So, have you ever wondered what famous monster would win in a fight? Yeah, this is that. And it has a dedicated following that's been hoping and praying that Capcom will reanimate it for more than just a crossover. So today, we're gonna look at what makes this series so spooktacular.
It's enough to make your blood run cold.
No! We do not talk about that eldritch horror! Ever!
So how did this graveyard smash come to be? Well, there are actually a couple of conflicting accounts as to the origins of the series. Alex Jimenez claims that the project started as what would have been a licensed title featuring the Universal monsters, but ended up with similar OCs because Capcom couldn't secure the rights. On the other hand, there's the story proposed by art director Akira Yasuda, who says that one of his colleagues came up with the idea. As for the characters themselves, each of the planners were assigned at least one character to flesh out, stuff like design, personality, backstory, what have you. Now this was at a time when stereotypes were pretty much what defined fighting game characters, and in fact, the Japanese devs didn't think much of the characters' personalities and lore for Darkstalkers. Many of the ideas for those characters came from the overseas staff. The first game in the series, Darkstalkers The Night Warriors, simply known as Vampire in Japan, was released in 1994 on Capcom's Near Immortal CPS-2 arcade hardware. It was generally well received as one of the best fighting games of the year. This was because of how it used previous Street Fighter games as a foundation, but managed to build on it to create something that was truly fresh at the time. Let's start with the roster, and yeah, I can see how the Universal monsters may have inspired this. Let's run down the original 10 characters. Dmitry Maximoff, a vampire noble, Morgan Ainsland, a succubus who used the same sprite for literally years.
Awesome rock on her.
Yes, already!
John Talbane, a werewolf who uses martial arts, Felicia, a catwoman who was raised by a nun and dreams of being a pop star, Lord Raptor, a hard rock zombie, Victor von Gerdenheim, who's basically Frankenstein's creature, the mummy Anakaris, the cursed samurai Bishamon, the merman Rikuo, and Bigfoot, I mean Sasquatch. Some of them are fighting for power in the demon world known as Makai, but behind the scenes is the evil alien named Pyron.
What? I can hear you over all this awesome!
This Pyron is more of a supernatural Galactus, by which I mean he seeks to wipe out life on Earth using an army of robots known as Huitzel, and then devour the planet for Din Din. And the only way to stop him boils down to one gigantic monster mash. Following the foundation laid by Street Fighter II, more specifically Super Turbo, Darkstalkers is a 6-button fighter. 3 punches, 3 kicks, command moves, and a special meter that fills as you deal damage. One of the first differences in gameplay with Darkstalkers is that your special meter will gradually deplete once it fills up so you can't hoard it. Well, there go my plans to save for a rainy day. The gauge also resets when you use an enhanced special move, or ES move, or your character's super, or SP move. We'd see a similar mechanic in later Street Fighter games with EX moves. Darkstalkers also included other mechanics we'd see in future Capcom games, including air blocking. The game also had an interesting take on clashing projectiles which takes momentum into account. Fascinating stuff! Apart from the solid gameplay, the presentation is excellent, one of Capcom's best-looking sprite-based fighting games in fact. All the characters are really well animated and feature the same level of kick-ass sprite work that Capcom was known for at the time.
It's really a shame Capcom all but abandoned sprites with advances in technology, but then we'd have to deal with Morgan's sprite again.
The stages for each character are equally impressive and fit the personalities of each character. Dimitri's castle has beautiful women in the background, Victor's stage looks very on brand for the creature, and Felicia tearing it up in Vegas actually makes sense when you think about her character, for example. I also love the ghosts you can see in Lord Raptor's graveyard. The soundtrack is also really well done, taking full advantage of the CPS2's sound font, but honestly what makes this game, and for that matter the series, are the characters themselves. Having monsters as the characters was a breath of fresh air for fighting games. The idea went way beyond your typical roster, which mainly included your typical wandering martial artist, military man, wrestler, etc. These characters were unique to the genre and really made Darkstalkers feel like it was something fresh and new. Like Mother trying a new variation on her old apple pie. And now I'm getting hungry.
Please, sir, I want some more.
Remember, this was also the period of time when Capcom was sequel happy, so naturally, after the success of Darkstalkers, Capcom would deliver a sequel the following year, called Night Warriors: Darkstalkers Revenge, or Vampire Hunter in Japan. And by sequel, I mean an enhanced version of the original with the same exact plot. Gee, where have we seen this before? In all seriousness though, there were plenty of enhancements. First off, the playable roster expanded to 14. Not only were bosses Huitzel and Pyron made playable, but we also got two brand new Darkstalkers, a half-vampire Dark Hunter named Donovan Bane, and a Jiangshi named Hsien-Ko, okay, the Japanese version calls her Lele, which is much easier to pronounce. First and foremost, the special meter was replaced by a 3-level super meter, which carried over between rounds and allowed players to stockpile meter for both ES moves and EX supers. Also coming into play was the chain combo. You know how in BlazBlue you have the ABC combo progression? Yeah, this game had it first, and it worked basically the same way. Light, medium, heavy, bibbidi bobbidi boo, enjoy your bonus, you. There was also the implementation of reversals, both from Guard and from Wake Up. Another carryover from the Street Fighter days. Yeah, as far as presentation goes, backgrounds got a bit of an overhaul, and the returning characters got remixed or even redone soundtracks. Another weird thing. Night Warriors pulled an SF2 Turbo by making alternate palettes the default. Either way, Night Warriors managed to build upon what its predecessor did, and what Capcom was admittedly used to doing by this point. But the real evolution was yet to come. 1997 would mark the arcade release of the third chapter in the Darkstalkers saga, which oddly enough kept its Japanese title worldwide as Vampire Savior, the Lord of Vampire. Keeping the original title wasn't always the plan. Capcom had originally intended to use the title Darkstalkers Jetta's Damnation for overseas releases. My guess as to why that plan fell through?
Ah yes, the most horrifying horror a video game can face. Censorship.
The Jetta in question is one of the three nobles of Makai, and a really scary-looking motherfucker, who has been resurrected after a premature death. Demons tend to be resistant, you know. So he awakens to see the demon world in chaos, and has decided that the only way to fix it is by restarting life by gathering all souls in a monster fetus in a pocket dimension. As one does. Among the souls left to fight are the cast of the previous game, sans Donovan, Huitzel, and Pyron, along with three new characters. Those are QB,
Bees, my god.
Lilith, who is actually an embodiment of part of Morgan's power, and a psychopathic fairy tale girl named Baby Bonnyhood who hunts Darkstalkers for fun. There was also a hidden character named Shadow who always takes the form of the last character you beat. And when I say this was the real evolution of Darkstalkers, I mean it in a few ways. The most obvious is that it ditches the typical best-of-3 format in favor of simply giving players 2 life markers, each of which are lost when a life bar is depleted. If this seems familiar, that's probably because you've played or watched Killer Instinct. Second, there are 2 types of damage. Red damage, which is permanent, and white damage, which gradually heals as you continue to avoid damage. Another new feature was Dark Force. No, people, we are not playing PSO! This system allowed players to burn meter to access a power unique to each character, similar to the Extend Force mechanic in Arcana Heart 3. It added quite some variety to the gameplay. For many fans, this game is considered one of Capcom's best fighting games, and it still has a competitive following to this day, enjoying plenty of side events at FGC tournaments. So it may surprise you that it had not one, but two arrangements in Japanese arcades. The first one, Vampire Hunter 2, was an arrangement of Night Warriors that featured said cast, but kept the life bar system from Vampire Savior. On the other hand, there was Vampire Savior 2, an arrangement of Vampire Savior which swapped out Jantel Bane, Rikuo, and Sasquatch for Donovan, Huitzel, and Pyron. Both of these arrangements also included a hidden character named Marionette, who is basically a mirror character. Unfortunately, they both also ditched unique character endings. Both arrangements were released in Japanese arcades later in 1997, but some of their features were included in the PS1 port of Vampire Savior, localized simply as Darkstalkers 3. Seriously, was keeping a consistent name really that hard? So, what's the definitive Darkstalkers experience? For those who have a PSP, it might be Darkstalkers Chronicle: The Chaos Tower, which includes the Darkstalkers 3 roster, but the option to play in the style of any game a character appeared in, similar to Hyper Street Fighter 2. If you have a PS3 or Xbox 360, you have the most recent option, Darkstalkers Resurrection, which contains both Night Warriors and Vampire Savior, and includes online play to boot. When this was first revealed, this was initially taken to be a sign of a true revival of the series. Unfortunately, we know where this story has gone. Yeah, this was in 2013, during Capcom's dark period, before they realized that making good games was more important in the long term than just selling more copies. In an article on Famitsu from 2014, former Capcom fighting game producer Yoshiori Ono said that a game at the time needed to sell 2 million copies before a sequel would be considered. So, how many copies did Darkstalkers Resurrection sell? Yeah, despite getting respectable scores from critics, Resurrection failed to hit sales targets, and as a result, the series has been dead for years now. Reasons for this sales failure range from the popularity of new products over re-releases, saturation in the market, and arguably the most damning of all, poor marketing. And while Darkstalkers was one of the most notable examples of series that got buried because of Capcom's then absurd expectations, it was far from the only one. But with Capcom in the middle of its redemption arc, including both new franchises and the latest and existing ones, there's a part of me that's holding on to hope that Darkstalkers may one day rise from its tomb to a new generation of gamers. Heck, Street Fighter V recognized rival schools by adding Akira to its DLC schedule, so they acknowledge their fighting game history. So maybe there's hope for Darkstalkers one day. God knows a revival would be amazing.
And it isn't as though Capcom doesn't acknowledge Darkstalkers. After all, there are a few characters from the series that are mainstays in crossover fighting games. But for a lot of fans, that just isn't enough. So is there hope for a resurrection someday? My brain says no, but my heart hasn't given up yet. I'm the Quarter Ghoul, and until next time, the graveyard is closed.
Well, to say this year's been difficult for gaming wouldn't be a lie, considering everything that's been going on. You want to know what's still happening? 2 console launches by Sony and Microsoft, because they're still trying to prove that they have the bigger stick. Want to know why they've been on track this year? Because consoles take years to develop. You want to know what will help the launch of their new consoles? Games! Next time, Top 10 Console Launch Titles! It's game time!